Alright, let's talk about tooltips, a thing I've been messing with for a while. Pull this all on one screen here. So we have this card. Okay. Now, what I've found is that we're not going to be able to use the tooltips that Unreal gives us for free by default. And it might just be my settings on the game. There's a number of factors. So the first thing I learned about tooltips is the kind of the basic stuff where you create a function binding and then you can either create the tooltip ahead of time or create it on the fly, which is what I'm doing here. Gives you some control over a few of the settings. It's not really expansive. You can't mess with the underlying widget all that much. I'm going to guess that maybe you could maybe get more control over it if you initialize it using something else, but I haven't experimented with that. So let's see. Um, close this down. We don't need this right now. Talked about that already. Okay. So this, I have to go back to the designer. This view here, I have to expand this out because when you hover to get to a tooltip, it will only render inside of this little mini canvas, which I'm not even sure what to call this because maybe it's a canvas. Maybe that's a fair word to use, but I think there's actually a thing called canvas over here, so not to be confused. Not to be confused with canvas panel, but I'm using like web terminology. Yeah, I'm not sure what vocabulary to use for this, but this space that is the only space that's available for a tooltip to pop up. So when you fire off this get tooltip widget and you hover over this, it's going to grab whatever you specify inside of that function, and if it's too big to fit, it'll just clip it. And it also doesn't let you control where to place it inherently. It'll just kind of dump it wherever. So if you use this widget transform, you can sort of pseudo control where it's going to be, but it also has to be available space. So if we look at this, which I don't have a shortcut to get to this, so I have to kind of run through this each time. F11. Okay, so we hover over here. You see this. Now, um, what we're looking at, and I can't move my mouse to show you, but it'll be right here, is some kind of anti-aliasing issue. And I've tried to fix this a number of different ways. So I've tried to, it works up here and it doesn't work down here. And you might think it doesn't work down there because it's transparent. And if I just put a black background that it would work, and that's the difference, but that's not the case because we were having the same issue here with this 99. Even setting it as opaque isn't sufficient to fix it. So it goes beyond just tooltips. It's really just any blueprint widget and text, specifically text. It has this problem. So some kind of issue with the way that the rendering works. And I've messed around with so many settings and tried doing stencil layer stuff because I thought that, which let me show here for a second. I thought that because of this, here's our, what are these called? Filters, our post-process materials. So I thought that these were causing it to mess up. Okay, so like when we have this, it's like, well, if we just disable this post-process, is that gonna fix the anti-aliasing problem? And at first I thought it did, and so I went about this long way of putting in a stencil mask on the widget, and that didn't really help. So, because in the end it turns out to be an anti-aliasing problem, which we need for other things, so I am not gonna turn that off. So what we're doing instead to get these clean numbers here that are legible is we had to put something 3D behind it, and I couldn't find any other way around it. So even if you make this opaque, or let's say I'm going to load this up as a image and make it opaque. So if I did this texture, this will work, but as soon as you add text to it, and I thought it was like color related or to where, let me see if I can find it. I think it's like called tooltip test. Yeah, so if we do this, let's just make this one not visible. Okay, so let's run this. Just to quickly show, this was sort of the most promising solution, was I pre-baked the tooltips elsewhere. Now what we're looking at here is an image. So it's just a JPEG image that is still having this weird effect on the text. So I have to assume that something with the anti-aliasing and the pixel color difference is causing this to happen. It's fine if you just do a gray box, you don't see that blurring. But so it's really peculiar. So getting around that, because this just drives me nuts. Like I've been stuck on this for a couple days. Like I can't stand it. I gotta fix it. So, so we got this fix here. There's some small problems. The problems are this is actually like a box, like it's a plane. This black area here. So that did work, and that's the same thing we're doing up here. We just have like a cylinder, and that cylinder is what's keeping it from glitching like that. So if we turn this off, which hopefully I can just turn the visibility off and I can reproduce it. So you can see like right now it's fine, it's still legible and everything, and this is what we had originally. But then once you check it out, and here we're going to have that same blurring problem with the numbers. You see this, it's not as bad. I didn't even notice it for a while, and I think it was because there was a bug with this gear. The gear is effectively the player mouse, and I just didn't, like, it was broken, and so I didn't notice that it was actually causing, like, the motion there was causing it. So I had some ideas to stop it, and to where it could just be frozen on the screen, and that's an option still, but the bigger problem here is whenever we're using this in-game in like the match, there's going to be like clouds in the background moving, there's going to be other ships and things, and the player will be able to move the screen around. So any of that motion is going to cause the same problem, so I have to solve it. Even if like right now it's just a small thing, later it's going to be a bigger issue. It's going to affect all the text on the card. So anywho, that should work for now. And I think it's unfortunate, but so if I don't want a box shape and I want it rounded corners, then what I'll have to do is just make a custom plane, and like so it'll actually be a 3D sort of 3D object. But that's the only way I could get it to work, because you can come in here and mess with the widget settings, and there's all these options. You can set it as a opaque, which still doesn't work. So you think that that would work if you set it to opaque, which I did try. So here's transparent. You can set it to opaque. That doesn't solve the problem. Um, so yeah, anywho, that was, you can fix the old tooltip, and then, so anyways, that's kind of where it's at. So I guess there's also a little peek into the cards, which I'm not ready to talk about yet, but I'll just mention briefly that this is the way that we're representing our stuff as in card form, and so I'm working on getting all the information to fit, which is now happening with the tabs. And so I think the last blog article started to talk about this stuff, and then but hasn't mentioned like kind of the new things in the particle engine effects, and so learning how to use Niagara. But I'll make a specific video about that when this is more polished and ready. It's still in progress. But the tooltip thing was such a hassle, I wanted to specifically bring it up and talk about how that was fixed, because I'm about to move on and probably forget.